If you are experiencing foundation issues, get a free estimate from Ox Foundations.
It is about 3 minutes before the hour. Election day tomorrow. Polls open here locally 7 a.m. and remain open until 7 p.m. Mike Landers, candidate for Sylacauga City Council District 1, joins us. Mike was on a week or so ago, and breaking news last week, and I'm quoting the first part of a story from the Daily Home. A letter from the Alabama Attorney General's office has raised questions regarding the legitimacy of a candidate for Sylacauga City Council. That is you, Mike Landers.
That is me. And Jimmy, it never occurred to me that that was breaking news, because I'll tell you how the whole issue of the topic came up of my viability as a candidacy. Is there was a telephone call to Mike Lewis's office at the Attorney General's office in Montgomery.
Now, who is Mike Lewis?
Mike is the communications officer with the Attorney General's office for Steve Marshall. Mike is not an attorney. Mike is a journalist. But Mr. Lee Perryman telephoned and asked a bare question that bore no relationship to any specific party. The question simply was, could someone with a felony conviction on their record serve in an elected office in Alabama? The answer they gave to that general specific question was that they could not. Now, I followed up after I saw the story, and I want to say to Mr. Perryman that to label that breaking news is, I think I guess he gets to determine what's breaking news in his media outlet, but that particular allegation relates to criminal charges 30 years ago. And by the way, there were not 5 felonies that I pled guilty to. There was one, and I would cite you to a Daily Home article from 2018 where it says, according to the district attorney's office, that Landers had only one prior felony conviction from the late 1980s. But I've been pardoned. The state of Alabama pardoned me. I started fresh. However, and you know, the other thing that I want to say at this point, Jimmy, is for anybody to think in the digital world that I would start this campaign without full awareness that first, politics being what politics is, even at the local level, that somebody wouldn't dig at my past. I mean, I'm low-hanging fruit. You know, if somebody wants to find something to point at me, that's fine. I've lived my life completely in the open. I never tried to conceal any of that. In fact, I had some folks on the campaign trail ask me, Mike, that trouble you got into so many years ago, or the trouble with the chamber or whatever, how does that affect you? And I said, well, I can tell you how it affected me. It reminded me that I make mistakes and will make more, hopefully not the same ones, but that I'm a human being and that I'm not perfect. But now, one of the opening statements I made in my campaign was that I'm far from perfect. And if you're looking for the perfect man, you shouldn't vote for Mike to start with. But, you know, Jim, and I don't want to digress too far, but I'll say this. I grew up on a theology that said there was only one perfect man, and it ain't Mike. But so that was inaccurate, but I had a pardon for that. Then 3 years ago, I worked for the Chamber of Commerce. In fact, I worked for 8 months at the Chamber of Commerce and was not paid. I worked full time and was not paid because the Chamber was in circumstances where they had lost their leadership and there had to be some extraordinary measures taken, and I had a good tenure at the Chamber of Commerce. When I left the Chamber of Commerce 3 years later, it was interesting because, you know, every employment situation, every business relationship generally has a termination point. Somebody decides that it's time to go, or we want you to go, et cetera, et cetera. But one of the things that happen when you end a business relationship is that there are documents that are signed. And one of the things that was signed when I left the Chamber of Commerce was an agreement, and it was executed by Mrs. Linda Hardy, president of the Sylacauga Chamber of Commerce, and myself. and I want to share that with you. It's short and it won't take but a minute, but it says, number one, the Executive Committee on behalf of the Chamber of Commerce hereby releases Mike Landers as Executive Director. Number two, this decision is made in consideration of the tenure of his resignation to the Chamber Executive Committee. Number three, that this agreement is a final agreement between all parties hereto, and all parties agree that this is in the best interest of the parties for each to hold harmless the other parties. This agreement settles all matters and all issues between the parties. The parties further agree that all matters related hereto are confidential. The parties hereto agree that neither party shall in any way bring discord or disrespect to the other. That this agreement is in the best interest of all parties, and that said Mike Landers will continue to be a Chamber member. That this agreement reflects a friendly and amicable separation of the parties, and that neither party is to malign or criticize either party. This agreement settles all matters between these parties and holds each other harmless on all issues, and is also a confidentiality agreement. It's signed by Mrs. Linda Hardy and Mike Landers, and it says done this 21st day of March 2017. That was the end of my relationship with the Chamber. I never heard from the Chamber, never had any written communication, never had any communication period that I'm aware of until 8 months later when the District Attorney's Office called me and said, well, they have some issues about the unauthorized use of a debit card. To which I replied, I'll come up and talk with you people, which I did. And of course, what you do is you immediately hire an attorney,
Sure.
of course. I hired Mr. Will Lawrence of Talladega, of Wooten, Thornton, Carpenter, O'Brien, Lasman, Lawrence, and he did a fine job. But now nobody knows the pressure and the difficulties until you're there as to what you have to do to resolve an issue. It occurred to me that I was paying Mr. Lawrence, that he had been retained by me, so I ought to listen to his advice, and which is what I did. And we agreed to that I would settle these matters with the Chamber, and that I would plead guilty to the unauthorized use of a debit card, and that the reason that it was a plea that I was willing to make is because the crime that's defined as unauthorized use of a credit or debit card is not a crime of moral turpitude. Now, I suggest to you that you go to the Secretary of State's webpage if you want to see what crimes of moral turpitude are, and I can tell you if you go to www.sos, Secretary of State, .sos.alabama.gov, you can see a complete list of crimes that are crimes of moral turpitude. The state of Alabama publishes that. It's by statute. And so by pleading guilty to those offenses, I lost none of my political or civil rights. So no restrictions on running a campaign, no restrictions on voting. And so it was a decision I made in the interest of my family, in the interest of economics, in the interest of doing what was right, and in the interest of what I had signed with the Chamber. Mm-hmm. I signed an agreement with them, and I planned to live by it, whether they chose to live by it or not. And I did later hear that one of the executive committee at the Chamber said, well, that agreement didn't mean anything. Well, I guess it meant something to me, and I guess under the law it probably means something, because how many times do you sign something in front of you that you don't think has any impact? Not many people. And I can tell you, having known Mrs. Hardy for a long time, and she's a very astute businesswoman, I can tell you that Mrs. Hardy didn't sign anything that she didn't understand what it meant, because she wouldn't have signed it, I don't believe. Now, perhaps she would have, I don't know. But so I'm not making an excuse for what I've done. I'm giving you the facts on what I've done. And I just want you to know that I never claimed to be perfection, but I never hid any of this either, because there is no hiding in the digital and virtual world. So
why now?
Why does it come out now? I think that, I'll tell you what, I had a conversation with Chris Norwood, and I'm not always the greatest fan of the Daily Home, but Chris Norwood is a reporter, and he's the one that was assigned this story about me. And I'll tell you that Chris Norwood told me, and I appreciate the integrity that he had to tell me this. He told me that the reason that the story was even considered by their editorial board was that once Mr. Perryman published it on his publication, that they felt that if they didn't publish it, it appeared that they were offering me some favoritism. That their editorial review board looked at it and they were suspect of the story because of the timing of the story, but that they were going to run the story, but they wanted my comments to run the story, which I appreciate very much. Now, I was not extended the courtesy of commenting on Mr. Perriman's story. And if I had been extended that courtesy, I would have given this information and asked him to report that. That was not what he chose to do. It is not what he did. There's also an additional question, Jimmy, that has come up, and you know, unfortunately, when you hire lawyers and there's no way to justify in dollars and cents what I'm having to do to clarify and defend this. When you hire lawyers from Montgomery and Birmingham and folks that are expert in political issues, expert in contest disputes and elections, and you have to have their advice, thousands of dollars immediately go out the door. Now, I think that I'd probably have to serve as a Sylacauga City Councilman for about 80 years to break even on this. But that doesn't matter. What matters is that if the press decides that they want to push me around, and I'm a fairly educated man and a fairly intelligent man, if someone in authority that owns access to the media wants to push you around, I guess they can. Now, do I have any problem with media reporting the truth? No. But Mr. Perryman could have gotten this story from me. He could have called me and I would have given him this very same story.
So you had no communication with Mr. Perryman?
None.
Who's the president of the Sylacauga City Council as well?
Absolutely, and who I understand, and I can't speak to the veracity of this, but I understand he's made the statement that he wants every councilman returned. Well, you know, I'm running in District 1, and obviously Mr. Fowler is one of those councilmen, but there's another part of this story that's alarming to me, because public records are public records. There's no question about that. The issue is now, and you know, the lawyers that I have are very thorough, and they're very devoted to their clients, and I'm sure the devotion ends as soon as the money ends. But be that as it may, they tell me that the way that Mr. Perryman might have obtained this information, if it was obtained from a state database, if it was obtained by a state employee, if it was transferred in certain ways to him, that there could be some issues there. So all those things have to be investigated. All those things have to be looked at. But the bottom line is, those are side issues. It's a side issue as to whether or not Mr. Perryman violated journalistic integrity by not asking me for a comment. It's a side issue as to whether or not Mr. Perryman is guilty of libel or slander by saying that I had 5 felonies when I had 1. The real issue is what is best for Sylacauga, what's best for the Sylacauga City Council, and best for the city of Sylacauga's population. Now, again, I am not the perfect candidate. And by the way, folks, here's my life. It's laid out here on this desk. Y'all just take a look. And by the way, if you want to know about the pardon I received so many years ago, I believe I have the number for the State Board of Pardons and Paroles here. I believe that number is 334-242-8700. That's in Montgomery at the Board of Pardons and Paroles. Call them up and ask them if I have a pardon. They'll tell you.
Now, you've talked to leadership in Montgomery.
Yes.
What do they tell you?
Yeah, John Merrill, who is the Secretary of State, is the ultimate election authority in the state of Alabama, except as to election challenges which would be handled initially through the circuit court, and then obviously if you appealed it, it'd go to the state Supreme Court. But when I had a conversation with John Merrill's office, and specifically with John, who and I knew John's daddy. John's daddy was probate judge up in Cleveland County for many years. So John has a long history of public service, and John's a really good guy. But I talked to John, and John referred me to his legal department, and John's question, the first question that I was asked is, are the ballots printed and have you been vetted and declared a candidate? And the answer was yes, the ballots have been printed and I am a candidate. He said, well, the appropriate response now would be for them to file an election challenge after the vote. And this may all be moot. I could lose the election. And if I lose the election, I can tell you something, people. I'm not going to be fussing about election results. Now, because I've got great faith in our election system. I've got faith in the city of Sylacauga election process. So you won't hear me complaining about that. It doesn't change things that were said that were untrue, that were printed that were untrue, that were done without an opportunity for comment, that were done without regard for the truth. Those will be matters I'll pursue personally and privately. But once tomorrow is over, then I'll be through with that election as far as my end. Now, if I'm victorious, I'm sure that there may be somebody out there that wants to try to litigate, and that will be up to them. If they can undo the will of the people of District 1, then they certainly should try to do that. And a judge should say that the voters' votes don't count.
So people that are voting here in Sylacauga can go to the poll tomorrow and choose the candidates from District 1, including Mike Landers.
Absolutely. They can choose either Mr. Ashton Fowler, Mr. Albert Patton, or Mike Landers. Now, I hope they choose Mike Landers. I hope they know that I'm a guy that can't be intimidated. I hope they know that I'm a guy that's got pretty good sense. I hope they know that I won't run for a fight and that I'm a real man when it comes to standing up for what I believe in. Who in the world other than me would knowingly go into this and take this kind of abuse and brought on myself? Now, I'm not shunning my responsibility in all this, but no, it's going to come up. You know it is, Jimmy. Years ago, I had a lawyer tell me, he said, the further you climb up the totem pole trying to do something, he said, the broader view folks have of your backside, and they can get a better shot at you. Mm-hmm. Well, that's the way I feel. I feel like I've exposed myself, and now I've taken a few hits. But no secrets. No secrets. And I can tell you, if anybody wants to ask me a question, just call me up and ask me, because I'm not a guy that's easily intimidated and bothered. But I'll tell you what, if you look at this and you think about it, and this has been hard on my family. But I've got to take responsibility for that. I'm the one that's got these problems. I've got to own that. But I'll tell you what, it's to know that you are loved unconditionally, to know that your wife and your family say to you, Mike or Dad, you knew this was coming and you still went full speed ahead. You never backed up and you never cowed down, and we love you. Those are words that a man cannot help but value. I thought, I'm the winner here, not Mr. Perryman, not Mr. Fowler, because Mr. Perryman has no wife and no family, and that's his choice, and certainly a legitimate choice. But he can never hear what I heard, because he'll never know the love that brings to you. The other thing is that you find that you have friends that you didn't know you had. I've had a great number of phone calls. After the story was released, I think we counted 65 phone calls within a 2-hour period of folks saying, keep going, Mike, or I'm going to vote for you, or I wasn't going to vote for you, but now I am, because somebody must be scared of something. So I can tell you that I'm already a winner. I am already a winner. And I'm not mad at anybody. Everybody has an agenda and they follow it. I wish that they would be more open. I wish that they would come out with their real agenda and expose themselves for what they really think and what they really are. But if somebody prefers to be disingenuous, then they can be. I would encourage everybody, though, to take the same look at every other candidate that's been taken at me. I can guarantee you, if everybody will do that, we'll get a better slate of candidates elected. Just find out what they're about. Find out what their mettle is when they're tested. Find out how tough they are. I'm a pretty tough old bird. One more thing I would say, and you know I watched President Trump, and certainly I draw no parallels between me and Mr. Trump. I'm a small man in a small town. But I guess I realize what it's now like to face every day that constant questioning about your past, about what you've done, what you've said, and it's pretty tough. But hey, come tomorrow night, Mr. Fowler or Mr. Patton or myself will be elected or be in a runoff. I can go to sleep tonight. I can thank the Lord that I'm blessed with a wonderful family and wonderful friends, and I'm not mad with anybody. I would like to read you something, and it's a short thing here, and I read it on Facebook, and it says...
There's got to be the gospel if it's on Facebook, man.
Well, you know, it can only be the truth. But it says, be hospitable to one another, serve one another, show sympathy and love to one another, as well with a tender heart and a humble mind. I saw that posted on Mr. Lee Perryman's Facebook page yesterday. I hope he feels the same in his heart as what he does with his pen, because if he does, then he will feel that towards me. And if he doesn't, it speaks to his character, not mine. So I just ask my voters to stay strong and stay steadfast. And I'm the same guy today. I'm the same guy that's going to stick up to you today that I was a week ago or a month ago. And you can vote for me or you cannot vote for me. That's your right. That is why this is the greatest place in the whole world, this country of ours, the USA, and that's why that you get to choose. And it's critical right now in Sylacauga, with all this discussion of building a new sports complex on Main Avenue, and this idea that we're going to do these things that cost us millions and millions of dollars. I'm going to tell you, we've got to get it under control. But Jimmy Dale, I appreciate it. Is there anything else you want to know?
No. I want to give you the opportunity. Mike and I had talked, and I wanted to get his take on this. And, you know, this information that came out just last week, you know, there's some people who question it as to the timing of it and
as to the source of it. So, I mean, it's just, and it's a fair question to ask, Jimmy. It's a fair question to ask because the information about the first criminal charge for which I was pardoned, they only had 30 years to dig that up. Do you think you could have found something in 30 years? I can go to I can take my phone right here and probably within 30 seconds find out more about most of my friends than I want to know. Yeah. But it is what it is. At the end of the day, I'm the one that's blessed. I'm the one that's got friends. I'm the one that's family loves me. I would like for y'all to look at something that, and I know that Jimmy Dale knows this because he's a man of clergy, a clergyman, but I'm going to tell you what. If you can't forgive me, you probably got another problem coming because we all have to have forgiveness. And when the Lord tells us to be like Him, we don't get there through earning what we get there through grace. So try to have the same compassion for me that you would somebody else. Try to have the same understanding. Try to have the same love. And if y'all do that, and I finish dead last in the race, I can assure you you're going to still be my friends if you want to be my friend.
All right.
Thank you, Jimmy.
This has nothing to do with anything else, anything that was said in this interview, but I'm glad that the God that I serve, no matter what, is a God of pardon. More Daybreak after this.